7:06 on BBC Radio Kent Breakfast with John and Maggie. It's Thursday morning. Thank you for joining us. They left our baby to rot. That from a mother whose stillborn daughter was left abandoned in a room for 6 days at the Medway Maritime Hospital before she was taken to a mortuary. The woman, who's asked not to be named, took legal action against the Medway NHS Foundation Trust, which later issued an apology. She told our reporter Sarah Smith that she was disgusted with the hospital's procedures.
You just automatically think they are going to be looked after. You don't expect what happened to her to happen. You expect automatically, as part of the NHS Trust, and the fact that these people choose to do their job, that they would automatically just care for them no matter what. I shouldn't have to question the care of my daughter after she's out of the room, because it should automatically be there. She should have been in a cold cot, but she wasn't in the cold cot. She was in a transport cot on the floor. And obviously my question over and over again was, why was she not in a cold cot? And they couldn't answer me on that day. She wasn't even thought about. She was just left on the floor to rot, because that is what happened to her. In a transport cot, she was just on the floor rotting. But at the end of the day, she still was a human being, and she still had the right to be treated the way that she should have been, that anybody else does when they pass away. Do you know what I mean? How did she feel? Do you know what I mean? I know she wasn't alive, but at the end of the day, that's still her body, you know. To think that nobody thought about her for nearly 7 days. You get angry, you know, you're upset, disappointment, you know, you end up losing trust in people. You know, it's going to haunt me for the rest of my life.
Well, Nick Fairweather is the Whitstable-based lawyer who specialises in clinical negligence who took on this case. Good morning to you, Nick.
Good morning.
You've dealt with a lot of cases in your time of clinical negligence. Where does this one fit in?
Oh, well, it's difficult to compare different types of cases, I suppose. What I would say is that this is quite an extraordinary set of circumstances, that something so basic has fallen apart procedurally at the Medway Maritime Hospital, and it is exceptional in that sense. I don't think I've ever come across a case where such abject errors have been made, which have had such a horrific effect, really, and compounding the grief that this family was going through anyway, having given birth to a baby who was stillborn. To have this happen on top is really quite atrocious.
Why did it happen?
Well, as is often the case, it was a sort of conspiracy of cock-ups, if I can put it like that. The procedures at the Medway Maritime Hospital weren't up to date. They weren't up to task, and it's a whole sequence of things that there wasn't proper paperwork, there wasn't proper allocation of babies after they'd passed to a particular midwife. There wasn't a particular bereavement midwife appointed there, and there was the whole chain of administrative failings and paperwork failings meant that this was able to happen. I mean, baby was actually destined to be transferred to Great Ormond Street for a post-mortem, which, when it ultimately took place, was compromised. But it's only because Great Ormond Street were chasing up that this was even detected 6-7 days after baby had been left on the floor in the storage room. So it's really an appalling set of circumstances, and the Trust have investigated it. And of course, we have the Trust saying they've done X, Y, and Z to put things right. We can only hope that is the case. But I see so many NHS reports where they are purporting to have made root and branch changes, and then the same problems happen into the future. So let's just hope that this time they have got what really are very simple procedures in order, so that a family in the future doesn't have to go through what this family have had to endure.
You mentioned there about the post-mortem, because obviously the mum and dad presumably wanted a post-mortem to figure out why they actually had a stillbirth in the first place.
Yes, exactly.
And you say it was compromised. Has it ended up that they have had a post-mortem and a result from that?
Well, there was a post-mortem and there was some information passed on, but it was incomplete because of what had happened. So, you know, that's another sort of agony piled onto this family, because obviously they did want answers, and they wanted They wanted to know for their future plans what had gone wrong with this particular pregnancy, and the best way to get to the bottom of that was through a post-mortem, which, as I say, was compromised because of what had happened in this case.
The impact for anybody listening who's had a stillbirth, miscarriage, anything like that, where they've lost a child, is incredible, and we could hear the very strong, powerful woman to speak to our reporter with all of that emotion. Yeah. The impact is incredible on the family. Do you think that the hospital have, in their response, been aware of that, and have they taken all of that on board?
Well, I hope so, Maggie. They didn't have a midwife specifically trained to deal with bereavement. As I understand it, they didn't have a specific bereavement sort of suite at the Medway Maritime. And if you compare and contrast how families are dealt with when they lose an adult loved one, clearly what was happening at the Medway Maritime didn't come anywhere near up to scratch. And when people lose a child in childbirth, it's very important the time that they can spend with the child then, and the handling of that in a sensitive and supportive way is really key, and it should be as much as part of the maternity services at any large hospital as everything else that they do so importantly. So I hope they have. I mean,
as you understand it now, are they going to employ a bereavement midwife?
Yes, as I understand it, they are going to do that, and they have made various changes. And, to a point, it all reads very well. But the proof of this will be that an appalling set of circumstances like this never recurs in the future in Medway Maritime or any other hospital in Kent.
Nick, thanks for joining us this morning. Nick Fairweather, clinical negligence specialist lawyer from Whitstable. Well, we did invite the Medway NHS Foundation Trust this morning to join us, but they said no. We did get this statement from their head of midwifery and gynaecology.
We're extremely sorry for the distress the family has suffered. We've already written to the family to acknowledge the failings on our part. In 2014, we carried out a serious incident investigation report into the circumstances surrounding this matter, the findings of which have been provided to the family. As a result, we've introduced new guidelines for our nursing staff to prevent this from ever happening again. We've employed the services of a bereavement midwife to provide specialist support to our staff and to help grieving families in coordinating bereavement care should they suffer the tragedy of losing a child. In addition, we'll also be unveiling a new bereavement suite this autumn, a facility being specially constructed for families who experience a stillbirth.